Definitely can't visit China after this one, huh? Don't be mad if you're Chinese, okay? I mean no harm. This is just a cool hypothetical scenario to think about. Because China is too big. They aren't a unique case. Russia is too big too, as are arguably the United States, both of which could break up into smaller nations too. But when it comes to China, I feel like this is even more relevant. I thought about this when looking at this ethnic map of the country. It's a little outdated, but it points out how there are immediately at least 4 to 5 relevant divisions within China's territory regarding ethnicity. You have the Turkic people in the northwest, commonly known as Uyghurs. You have the Tibetans in the southwest, the Mongols up north, and then significant ethnic minorities in the south too, with Thai and Miao Miao groups. I would argue this is mostly the result of China's imperial conquests, most of them dating back to the times of the Qing dynasty, which vastly expanded China's territorial rule. This old map shows that. The areas under Chinese direct rule were expanded, and indirect rule was established through client states or influence in Xinjiang, Tibet, Qinghai, Mongolia, and Manchuria. They even ruled all of the Korean peninsula at the time and part of what is today Far East Russia. Just as they lost these territories and what is now independent Mongolia, they could lose the other ones too, being potentially reduced to their core territory here in darker yellow. Even with the same ethnic regions, significant divides exist too. This map depicts Taiwan as a part of China, while half the island is still Formosan. Han Chinese are the majority group, but their ethnic connection with the mainland doesn't prevent them from wanting to be their own country. The same thing happens in Hong Kong, for instance, culturally distinct enough to perhaps justify its independence. Now, I'm aware the argument can be used the other way around too, just like the Taiwanese don't necessarily want to be united with China just because they are also Han. You could also say that the Chinese Mongols don't necessarily want to be Mongolian. And the point of the video is more of a hypothetical exercise of what if. So let's find out which new countries could emerge within China, why they could or couldn't be justified, and what that would mean for China, the region, and the world. I think the best way to go about this is to go one by these regions, understand where they are, who are the native people there, how the territory came to be under Chinese control, and whether or not it would make sense for them to be independent. We'll be taking a look at 7 would-be countries: Uyghuristan, Tibet, an expanded Mongolia, an independent Hong Kong and Macau, a fully sovereign Taiwan, and even a potential split between Han China, South China, and even Manchuria. Xinjiang, Tibet, Mongolia, and Guangxi in the south are already autonomous regions, so hey, they're halfway there to being a country. Let's start with Uyghuristan, also known as Xinjiang. Xinjiang was conquered fairly early by the Chinese. The Han dynasty took control of it in around the 2nd century BC, and it was a key route of the ancient Silk Road, but they quickly lost control and the local Uyghurs took over. The Chinese only returned in 1759, asserting their rule over the Oirat, Mongol, and Dungar people, many of which were, and still are, Muslim. When the Qing dynasty fell to the First Chinese Republic, the region became quite unstable. There were a bunch of short-lived attempted independent states, such as the East Turkestan Republic in 1933 and 44. The Republic of China retained control but struggled a lot with rebellions. It was only after the Chinese Civil War that the victorious People's Republic of China Army took the territory back in 1949, through negotiations and military threats too. Today, many argue they keep them subdued under repression and persecution, attempting to eliminate their cultural identity through force. They're now known as the Xinjiang Uyghur Autonomous Region. They're the 8th largest country subdivision in the world, with about 25 million inhabitants. At 1.6 million square kilometers, it would be the 18th largest country in the world if it was independent. Some people still call it East Turkestan and connect it to the other Central Asia Turkic countries, claiming they should be instead aligned with them. It has abundant oil and mineral reserves, so it would likely do well on its own. It is China's largest natural gas production region, and I think its cultural differences, mainly their ethnicity and religion, would justify their own national identity. Now, my country, Portugal, is a pretty sunny country, and as summer approaches, we're getting like 16 hours of daylight. And while this is a good thing, it can also interfere with your sleep quality. So how do I solve it? With the sponsor of today's video, Manta Sleep. I've tried a couple sleep masks in the past and none of them have really been to my liking. They use not so good materials, they end up letting light in, and they're built in a way where you can't really sleep sideways, which I like to do. Manta Sleep took all of these issues and just solved them. They provide 100% blackout, zero eye pressure, they use great materials that allow airflow, and they also made unique C-shaped eye cups so you can still sleep on your side. The strap is also adjustable, which is useful if you have a big head like mine. It's also machine washable in a mesh that comes in the box. I've been wearing them every night since I got it, and I'm actually getting a second one for my fiance. Wow, it really is like blackout. If you want to try it and get one as well with free US shipping, you can use the link in my description. Between May 26 and June 8, if you spend $99, you get 15% off, and if you spend $149, you get 20%. And the first 500 people receive a free sleep accessory kit too. So, if you're ready to sleep through those early sunrises, you should try Manta Sleep today through the link in the description. And now, let's get back to the video. Now, let's talk about Tibet. Tibet is located on the world's highest plateau, bordering India, Nepal, and Bhutan. If it were independent, it would be one of the largest countries in Asia, covering about 1.2 million square kilometers, roughly the size of South Africa. Today it has a population of about 3.6 million people, the vast majority being ethnic Tibetans. The native people are ethnically distinct from the Chinese. They speak Tibetan languages, follow Buddhism, which is a central part of their identity and culture. Chinese influence in Tibet dates back to the Yuan dynasty in the 13th century, but that was more symbolic than direct control. Real sustained control by the Chinese came only during the Qing dynasty in the early 18th century. Even then, the region remained fairly autonomous, governed by lamas and monasteries. After the Qing fell in 1911, Tibet declared its independence and operated as a de facto independent state for decades. It had its own government, flag, currency, and foreign relations, even signing treaties with British India. But in 1950, shortly after the founding of the People's Republic of China, the PLA invaded Tibet. By 1951, under heavy pressure, they supposedly signed a treaty guaranteeing autonomy, but in practice being absorbed into China. The Dalai Lama fled to exile in India, and today it is essentially a Chinese territory. Economically, they're very underdeveloped, so they could struggle if they were independent, but they are rich in natural resources like copper, gold, and water. It's home to many rivers that supply water to much of Asia, so it makes it very strategically important. They have a unique language, history, religion, culture, and they were independent for so long in history. I think all of these make up strong arguments for their national identity and independence. Next, we have Mongolia. Mongolia proper, which is a country today, was also under Qing rule. They became independent in 1912, but the rest of Mongolia, where actually more Mongolians live than in the country, remained under Chinese rule. Stretching across 1.18 million square kilometers. It has a population of around 25 million. Only about 17% are ethnic Mongols, the rest are Han Chinese. If it were united with Outer Mongolia, the new country would cover 2.6 million square kilometers, larger than any country in Asia except for China and Russia. Historically, the area was home to nomadic steppe cultures, most famously the homeland of the Mongol Empire. After the empire fragmented, the Mongol regions fell under the influence of various powers, including the Yuan dynasty and later the Qing, the Republic of China, and the People's Republic in 1949. Today, Inner Mongolia is an autonomous region, but like Tibet and Xinjiang, autonomy is tightly controlled. Their language has been increasingly replaced by Mandarin in schools, and the region has seen protests over that cultural erasure. Economically, the region is rich in coal, rare earth minerals, and grazing land, and combined with Mongolia's own resources and mining potential, I think a united Mongolian state could be economically self-sufficient. Culturally and ethnically, many Mongols still feel a connection across the current borders. A reunification would fulfill long-standing pan-Mongol dreams, reviving an identity that does predate modern Chinese control. Let's move all the way south now to a much smaller example with Hong Kong, and Macau, which only became Chinese again at the end of the 20th century, previously being under the control of Britain and Portugal. I'm not arguing a return of colonial control, that would be insane, but the reality is that those long periods of European rule created unique local identities and a bigger desire towards more direct democracy that contrasts with China's regime. Hong Kong at least had a ton of pro-democracy protests a few years ago. If they formed a joint independent city-state, they would have a combined population of 8.5 million people with an area of over just 3,000 square kilometers. It's small but densely populated and economically very powerful. Hong Kong was ceded to Britain beginning in 1842 after the First Opium War. Macau was colonized by the Portuguese even earlier in the 1500s. In 1997 and 99, they were handed back to China under the one country, two systems principle, which was supposed to guarantee political and economic autonomy for 50 years. However, over the past 2 decades, China has increasingly eroded their freedoms. Both cities have their own legal systems, currencies, cultural identities, with connections to both English and Portuguese heritage. As independent city-states, they could follow the models of places like Singapore. Nearby is a country that is already de facto independent, Taiwan. Despite this, the mainland China continues to claim it. It's also just a continuation of their internal conflict. To be fair, Taiwan also still claims all of mainland China, which is crazy. A balkanization of all of the mainland would probably remove these territorial disputes, and Taiwan would be allowed to exist without the constant threat of Chinese annexation. And finally, we are left with China proper. The areas that were already under direct control of the Chinese at the time of the Qing dynasty, plus Manchuria, which actually was where the dynasty was from, I think. Manchuria is actually a good example of how China has always been a country with various nations within it. The First Republic's flag was precisely a banner of 5 races under one union, with each stripe symbolizing them. Red for the Han, yellow for the Manchu, blue for the Mongols, white for the Muslims, and black for the Tibetans. Maybe this would justify Manchuria being independent too. After all, between 1932 and 45, they existed as its own entity, despite being a Japanese imperial puppet. But today, the Manchu people are not that significant. The Han make up 91% of the population, and there's more Uyghurs, Hui, and Miao than Manchu people. But speaking of the Hui and Miao, we could also make a looser argument for a separation between central China and the south. The dominant languages down there aren't Mandarin, but Cantonese, Hakka, Minnan, and other southern dialects. The cultural identity is distinct and historically less tied to Beijing's power. Historically, southern China was integrated into Chinese civilization relatively late, during the Han dynasty, resisting northern domination and even forming separate kingdoms during periods of fragmentation, such as the Southern Ming or the Nanyue Kingdom. The people here often see themselves as culturally different from northern Han Chinese in food, dialect, customs, and even values. It's actually pretty interesting if you live in a Western country to find out where your local Chinese restaurant is from, because the food that they cook is usually connected to the region that they come from and can be pretty different among themselves. There's a case to be made for a more decentralized or even independent South China that reflects these distinct regional traits, but this is admittedly a more unlikely scenario than all the others, which are all unlikely to begin with. So that is how China could break up into 6, 7, even 8 new separate countries. What do you think about this? Does this at all make sense to you? And if it does, do you think that it's possible that it will ever happen? Let me know in the comments. Thank you so much to my patrons for their direct support over on Patreon every month. If you want to support us there, make sure to join. You get early access to videos and sometimes some extra bonus too, plus your name here in the credits of the video. If not, that's totally fine. Thank you for watching anyway. And I will see you next time for more general knowledge. Do you want to guess what the Moomin Cup is? It's the same one as last time, because I'm recording both videos in a row. I'm also wearing the same clothes because we are going to Norway in a couple of weeks and I can't do the videos there, so I'm just doing everything in advance, 2 or 3 videos.